We're going to talk about the final days of President Andrew Jackson, and then the inauguration of William Henry Harrison today, and then we're going to watch a video on the lectures basically, and then tomorrow we're going to watch a video called Andrew Jackson, Hero or Villain. We'll see what we think of that, okay? We told you yesterday that after the inauguration of Martin Van Buren in March of 1837, he left Washington, D.C. and returned to his home in Tennessee. I don't remember telling you this yesterday, but I'm going to tell you today that he was so popular that people lined the route from Washington, D.C. all the way to his home and cheered on the 70-year-old president as he returned home. That's quite a tribute to someone when people will line the entire route all the way from Washington, D.C. to your plantation in Tennessee, cheering you on. We told you that he arrived home to his plantation. He found himself more than $7,000 in debt. That would be about $200,000 in today's dollars, due to the fact that his son, Andrew Jackson Jr., poorly managed his plantation in Tennessee. As a result, you got to feel a little bit sorry for Andrew Jackson because he was struggling both financially and physically. The remainder of his life, retirement is supposed to be a time where you're financially stable and you feel good. He was just the opposite. He was incredibly disappointed and somewhat depressed and angry about William Henry Harrison's victory in the election of 1840, because he knew that the Whig Party stood for everything opposite of the party that he represented and everything that he had done. On June 8th, is this where we ended yesterday? Okay, yes?
So was the Whig Party kind of like a
Third party?
Yeah.
There was, and it will not last forever.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is where we need to really concentrate. On June 8th of 1845, Jackson was very weak with illness and pretty much bedridden. On June 8th of 1845, Jackson was very weak and bedridden. His doctor had come to see him and didn't feel like there was anything he could do for him. Death was imminent, and so he simply gave him something to make him rest comfortably. Jackson, sensing that this was the end for him, summoned his son and his friends and his slaves to his bedside. So Jackson, realizing this was going to be the end, summoned his son, his friends, and his slaves to his bedside. And that was on June 8th of 1845. One of those slaves, ironically, that was at his bedside was Hannah, whom his wife had died in her arms 17 years earlier. You remember the video where Hannah said, Mr. Jackson, when Rachel had a heart attack? Hannah was still with the family 17 years later, and ironically was at Andrew Jackson's bedside at the time of his death. So again, on June 8th of 1845, Andrew Jackson was very weak with illness. His physician had come to see him. He didn't feel like there was really anything he could do for him other than make him comfortable. Jackson, realizing this was going to be the end, summoned his son and his friends and his slaves to his bedside. And also among those at his bedside was his slave Hannah, whom his wife Rachel had died in her arms 17 years earlier. Now these quotes are important that you have down for the test. According to witnesses at his bedside, these were Andrew Jackson's last words. These were his last words. Quote, "I hope to meet you all in heaven, black and white." I hope to meet you all in heaven, black and white. Was he a slave owner? Yes. Did he treat his slaves with good regard, do you believe? He really did. So with those last words, I hope to meet you all in heaven, black and white, Andrew Jackson passes away. Now, according to witnesses, someone in the room made this quote. As soon as he died, someone in the room said, quote, "Do you think General Jackson has gone to heaven?" So according to historians, someone in the room after the president died said, "Do you think General Jackson has gone to heaven?" Do you think General Jackson has gone to heaven? This is the great part that sums up Andrew Jackson. When one of the people in the room said, "Do you think General Jackson has gone to heaven?" one of his slaves replied, quote, "If General Jackson wants to go to heaven, who's going to stop him?" Doesn't that not sum the guy up, really? So again, someone in the room states after the president passes away, "Do you think General Jackson has gone to heaven?" In which one of his slaves replies, "If General Jackson wants to go to heaven, who's going to stop him?" That's Andrew Jackson. So over the quotes one more time. According to witnesses, Andrew Jackson's last word before passing away were, "I hope to meet you all in heaven, black and white." In which one of the men or women in the room states, "Do you think General Jackson has gone to heaven?" In which one of his slaves replies, "If General Jackson wants to go to heaven, who's going to stop him?" At his request, Andrew Jackson was buried next to Rachel at the couple's plantation known as the Hermitage. So at his request, Andrew Jackson was buried next to his wife Rachel at the couple's Tennessee plantation known as the Hermitage. Any questions on Andrew Jackson's life after retirement? Okay, that'll take us to our last subtopic of the day, which is the inauguration of William Henry Harrison. The inauguration of William Henry Harrison. On March 4th, 1841, President-elect William Henry Harrison would be sworn into office on Inauguration Day. On March 4th of 1841, President-elect William Henry Harrison is scheduled to be sworn into office on Inauguration Day. Not a very nice day in Washington. Rainy, cold, windy, what people might consider a brisk day for the inauguration. Again, it was cold, rainy, windy, not a very nice day, kind of a brisk day in Washington. Even though the weather was bad, William Henry Harrison, who was 68 years old at the time, insisted on delivering his inaugural address despite the bad weather. So even though the weather was poor, William Henry Harrison, who was 68 years old at the time, insisted on delivering his inaugural address in that bad weather. His speech was kind of a lengthy address. It lasted an hour and 40 minutes, a lot of it during a drenching downpour of rain. So he gives a speech of an hour and 40 minutes. That would be quite lengthy in today's terms of an inaugural address. And during a lot of the speech, it is pouring rain, drenching rain. Well, Harrison arrives back at the White House after his speech, soaking wet, and soon comes down with a cold. So Harrison arrives at the White House soaking wet and soon comes down with a cold. Well, this cold gets progressively worse as the days go on. This cold gets progressively worse as the days go on. And on April 4th of 1841, 1 month to the day after taking office, President Harrison dies of pneumonia. On April 4th, 1841, exactly a month after he took office, to the day, President Harrison dies of pneumonia. So, for the first time in American history, a vice president succeeds to the presidency. Vice President John Tyler becomes the first vice president in American history to succeed to the presidency. First time in American history, a sitting president dies in which the vice president assumes the presidency. You know who served as vice president the rest of that term? And think about that. It was a pretty long term. It was 11 months, right? 3 weeks and 6 days, basically, or whatever. I probably got the math wrong there. But he served a long time, did he not? Guess who the vice president was under Tyler? Nobody. Tyler went without a vice president during that almost 4-year term. 11 months, 3 years and 11 months, he served as president without a vice president. John Tyler's not going to be in the running to serve his own term. He simply is going to serve the rest of William Henry Harrison's term. And during that time, 3 important issues occur in the United States of America. 3 things occur of importance during the time that John Tyler serves the remainder of William Henry Harrison's term. First of all, the boundaries of the nation extend all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So we're going to have states over in this area, are we not? Okay? So boundaries of the United States are going to extend all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Secondly, which will be our next test material, the issue of Texas will be settled in their fight for independence known as the Mexican War, which includes the Alamo. Okay? So that'll be what we'll go into next. So the second issue that happened during the administration of John Tyler is the issue of Texas would be settled by virtue of a war with Mexico known as the Mexican War. And this is probably the most interesting of the 3. During John Tyler's administration is where we're first going to have differences of opinion between North and South, which will eventually lead to civil war. So it was during John Tyler's administration for the first time that Northerners start to have differences of opinion with Southerners, and later in history, not John Tyler's fault, but later in history, those differences between North and South are going to lead this country into a civil war. Okay, that'll end that, and we're going to watch a video. Now I want you to listen carefully. This video today is going to reiterate the things I gave you in the notes, but I want you to note a few things that you think are important that they say that I didn't mention. I try not to mention everything so you do get something off of the video. So try to pick up a couple of things as you peruse your notes as it goes through that you can pick up that you thought, gee, that's interesting, or gee, I didn't know that, and Mr. Durr didn't tell me. Okay? That's kind of the plan. In the meantime, while I'm getting this video ready, Miss Riley is going to give you a handout that I wanted to give you before, and I don't want to ruin your education. This is a color picture of a Cherokee Rose, so put that in your binder.